Mike McCarthy faces one massive linebacker problem hanging over Steelers training camp. A former Steelers defensive back is raising red flags about one specific position group heading into training camp. A defensive coordinator is quietly trying to fix something that has plagued this defense for over a year, and two young linebackers are facing serious questions about whether they can be trusted in critical moments. Here's why all of this matters for a team that just won its division but has bigger goals in mind. We are going to break down exactly what's being said about the Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker room, look at the numbers behind the concern, and explain why this issue could define how far this defense goes in 2026. And later, we'll get into why the front office's decision to stand pat at this position might be the most important storyline of the entire offseason. Let's start with the big picture. The Steelers finished the 2025 season at 10-7, good enough to capture the AFC North title. That's a solid accomplishment on paper, especially in a conference that continues to get tougher every year. But for Pittsburgh, division titles have become almost secondary to the bigger issue, which is what happens once the games matter most. That's exactly what happened again this past postseason. The Steelers ran into the Houston Texans in the wildcard round, and the result wasn't close. Houston walked away with a 30-6 win, and it was yet another early playoff exit for a franchise that has built a reputation over the last several years for getting in the door but never making real noise once they're inside. So heading into training camp, the obvious question becomes, what needs to change? And according to former Steelers safety Ryan Clark, the answer isn't really about the quarterback position or even the offensive line. It's about linebacker play. Clark didn't hold back when discussing this on the Mina Kimes show. He pointed directly at the need for better production at the second level of the defense, and he made it clear this isn't just his own outside opinion. Clark has an ongoing relationship with Whitt Jr., who is now the team's assistant head coach, and the two have had direct conversations about how to fix this specific part of the roster. That's an important detail. This isn't a media narrative built out of thin air. This is coming from someone with real access to the building, relaying concerns that are apparently being discussed internally by the coaching staff itself. So let's get into why the linebacker spot has become such a point of concern. The two names at the center of this conversation are Patrick Queen and Payton Wilson, playing alongside a very talented pair of edge rushers in Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. The concern isn't about the outside presence, it's about what's happening in the middle of the field. Start with Patrick Queen. On the surface, bringing in a former first-round talent to anchor the middle of your defense sounds like exactly what a contending team needs. But the tape and the numbers from this past season tell a much more complicated story. Queen allowed 829 receiving yards on 74 receptions across 17 games, and that came with opposing quarterbacks posting a passer rating of 114.1 when targeting him in coverage. For context, that's the kind of number that would make any quarterback in the league look like an MVP candidate. On top of the coverage issues, Queen missed nearly 20% of his tackle attempts, which is a significant number for a player whose primary job is stopping the run and cleaning up plays before they turn into chunk gains. Across more than 1,100 defensive snaps, Queen didn't record a single interception and finished the year with just one sack. Those are the kinds of splash play numbers that typically define whether a linebacker is viewed as a difference maker or simply a body in the middle of the field. Pro Football Focus reflected all of this with a 43.5 overall grade, ranking him 78th out of 88 qualified linebackers league-wide. That's a tough pill to swallow for a player who was brought in to be a stabilizing force in the middle of this defense. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Payton Wilson's situation tells a slightly different, more nuanced story. Wilson was actually the engine of this defense in terms of raw tackle production, leading the entire unit with 126 tackles on the season. That's the kind of number that jumps off the stat sheet and makes you think this is a player performing at a high level. But dig a little deeper and the picture becomes more complicated. Despite the tackle numbers, Wilson consistently struggled against the run, to the point where the coaching staff found themselves rotating him out of the lineup in favor of depth pieces like Malik Harrison and Cole Holcomb. That's a significant red flag. When your coaching staff is pulling a starting linebacker in specific situations because of run fit issues, that tells you the tape isn't matching the box score. And in coverage, Wilson wasn't much better than Queen. He allowed 45 receptions on 52 targets for 410 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those are numbers that suggest opposing offensive coordinators were comfortable attacking him in the passing game. All of that led to a 52.6 overall PFF grade for Wilson, placing him 65th out of 88 qualified linebackers. Better than Queen, but still far from where a team with Super Bowl aspirations wants to be at a critical position. So here's the real issue. This isn't a situation where one linebacker is struggling and the other is thriving. Both starters had legitimate statistical concerns in 2025, and that's exactly why Ryan Clark is sounding the alarm heading into training camp. Now, here's the part of the story that makes it even more significant. Despite these clear statistical concerns, the Steelers made zero changes to their inside linebacker depth chart this offseason. No notable additions, no subtractions. The exact same group that struggled with tackling efficiency and coverage limitations in 2025 is walking into training camp as the presumptive starting duo again in 2026. That's a big bet for a coaching staff to make, especially for a team that has shown it can win enough games to capture a division title, but has struggled badly in exactly the kind of moments where linebacker play tends to matter most, which is the postseason. But there's a piece of the story that offers some optimism, and it's worth acknowledging. The Steelers do have a new defensive coordinator this year in Patrick Graham, and according to reports, both Queen and Wilson have been actively working on adjusting to a new scheme and structure under his direction. That matters because sometimes a player's production isn't just about talent or effort, it's about scheme fit. If Graham's system asks Queen and Wilson to do different things than what they were being asked to do previously, there's a real chance both players could see improved production simply through better alignment with what they do well. Ryan Clark himself expressed confidence that Graham and Mike McCarthy will find a way to identify and correct these issues before the games start to count. That's an important distinction here. This isn't a story about players who lack talent or effort. It's a story about whether a new coordinator can put them in better positions to succeed, and whether internal development can solve what free agency and the draft did not address this offseason. And that's exactly why this situation is worth watching closely as training camp opens. The margin between a good regular season and a deep playoff run in this league often comes down to exactly these kinds of situations. Positions where a team is banking on internal improvement rather than outside additions. For a Steelers team that has now made the playoffs but failed to advance in back-to-back years, the linebacker position isn't just a roster question. It's a referendum on whether this coaching staff can develop what they already have, or whether history repeats itself once the postseason arrives again. So here's the real question worth debating. Do you believe Patrick Graham's scheme changes can fix the issues Patrick Queen and Payton Wilson had in 2025? Or is this a problem that ultimately needed to be solved through outside additions rather than internal development?